January 5th, 1943, 02:18 hours. USS Helena, Guadalcanal. Lieutenant Russell. Red Cochrane gripped the firing controls of Mount 52, tracking a Japanese Valdive bomber, descending through scattered moonlight toward the American cruiser line. His finger tensed on the trigger as the aircraft entered the kill zone, 2,800 yards and closing fast. What Cochrane didn't know was that the shells he was about to fire contained technology so secret that even he, the gun mount captain, hadn't been fully briefed on its capabilities. "Commence firing," came the order through his headphones. The 5-inch gun roared, sending its projectile skyward at 2,600 feet per second. Inside that shell, a miniaturized radar set no larger than a light bulb began transmitting radio waves at 180 megahertz, listening for their return. When the echo indicated the valve was within 70 feet, the fuse made its decision: detonation. The aircraft disintegrated 12,100 yards from Helena, transformed into burning fragments by a shell that never touched it. Cochrane had just achieved the first verified combat kill using a proximity fuse, though the achievement would remain classified for another 2 years. The technology packed into that shell, formerly designated VT for variable time to disguise its true nature, would transform naval warfare in ways that neither Cochrane nor the Japanese pilot could have imagined. By war's end, this marriage of radar and explosives would destroy thousands of kamikaze aircraft, turning Japan's weapon of desperation into a predictably defeated tactic. The mathematics of salvation were being written in vacuum tubes and radio waves. Within 2 years, proximity fuses would achieve what courage and conventional weapons could not: the systematic defeat of pilots willing to die. The kamikaze threat emerged from strategic mathematics that offered Japan no favorable solutions. By October 1944, after the catastrophic losses at the Philippine Sea, where American forces destroyed 645 Japanese aircraft while losing only 123, conventional aerial attacks had become exercises in futility. Vice Admiral Takijiro Onishi, commanding the 1st Air Fleet in the Philippines, faced the arithmetic of defeat: fewer than 100 operational aircraft against an American invasion fleet of over 700 ships. On October 19, 1944, Wet Mabalacat Airfield, Onishi presented his solution to the staff of the 2001st Air Group. Captain Rikihei Inoguchi recorded his exact words: "The salvation of our country can only come from spirited young men willing to sacrifice their lives by body-crashing enemy carriers." The logic seemed irrefutable. Conventional bombing achieved hit rates below 10% against maneuvering warships. A piloted aircraft guided until impact could theoretically achieve 50% success rates. One pilot, one aircraft, potentially one ship. In Japan's desperate calculus, this equation offered hope. The first organized kamikaze attack struck on October 25, 1944, Lieutenant Yukio Seki led 5 fighters of the Shimpu Special Attack Unit against American escort carriers off Samar. Each aircraft carried a 250-kilo bomb. Each pilot carried poems for their families and photographs of Emperor Hirohito. They achieved what months of conventional attacks had failed to accomplish: direct hits on American carriers. USS Senthi suffered a kamikaze strike, killing 16 sailors. The USS Suwannee was hit minutes later. Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's leading ace with 34 victories, wrote in his action report, "This is a form of attack that is impossible to stop completely. No amount of pilot skill can guarantee interception of every attacker. We are facing an enemy who has weaponized death itself." Before proximity fuses became widespread, naval anti-aircraft defense relied on 3 weapon systems, each with critical limitations that kamikaze tactics ruthlessly exploited. The 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns formed the outer defensive ring, engaging targets between 10,000 and 18,000 yards. These fired shells with mechanical time fuses that required manual setting before loading. Fire control officers used the Mark 37 gun fire control system, an analog computer calculating where an aircraft would be when the shell arrived. Against a predictable bomber at 200 millimolar pH, maintaining a steady altitude, the system functioned adequately. Against a kamikaze at 400 millimolar in a terminal dive, constantly maneuvering, it became almost useless. Gunner's mate first class. James Morrison of USS Enterprise described the frustration. "We'd calculate for 4.5 seconds, expecting the plane at 8,000 feet. But kamikazes would dive, climb, slip sideways, anything to throw off our solution. By the time our shell exploded, the plane was hundreds of feet away. We were fighting geometry with arithmetic. The 40mm Bofors guns provided intermediate defense between 4,000 and 6,000 yards. These fired contact-fused shells requiring direct hits against a diving kamikaze, presenting a frontal target of less than 80 square feet. Gunners had to achieve direct hits on targets, moving at 400 to 500 minikimetros. Statistical analysis showed a single round hit probability below 0.3%. Chief Petty Officer Harold Stassen, commanding a quad 40mm mount on USS Hornet, testified, "We'd fire 480 rounds per minute, tracers everywhere, and watch the kamikaze fly straight through. Even when we hit them, unless we destroyed the engine or killed the pilot instantly, momentum carried them into the ship." The 20mm Oerlikon cannons formed the final defensive line at 2,000 yards or less. By the time a kamikaze entered their range, impact was typically 5 seconds away. These weapons fired shells so small that multiple hits were required for structural destruction. Seaman First Class Robert Baker, an Oerlikon gunner on USS Missouri, recalled, "At 2,000 yards, you had maybe 4 seconds. Your mind went blank. You just held the trigger and prayed." Even if you shredded the wings, the fuselage kept coming. The proximity fuse's development began not with kamikazes, but with German bombers over London. During the 1940 Blitz, British anti-aircraft batteries required an average of 8,500 shells to destroy one bomber. The mathematics was unsustainable. Shells had to be set for specific altitudes, but bombers constantly changed height. A shell detonating 100 feet from a bomber inflicted no damage. One exploding within 30 feet was lethal. In September 1940, Sir Henry Tizard arrived in Washington carrying Britain's most precious military secrets in a black metal deed box, offered freely to America in exchange for production capacity. Among them was a concept for miniaturized radar that could fit inside an artillery shell. The assignment went to Section T of the National Defense Research Committee, led by Dr. Merle Tuve, at what would become Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. The challenges seemed insurmountable. They needed to create a device smaller than a coffee cup, sturdy enough to survive 20,000 times the force of gravity when fired, sophisticated enough to distinguish aircraft from ground returns, and cheap enough for mass production. The breakthrough came from physicist James Van Allen, later the discoverer of the radiation belts surrounding Earth. Van Allen proposed using hearing aid vacuum tubes, the smallest available, which could potentially survive the massive acceleration of gunfire. These tubes, designed for deaf patients' earpieces, would have to function after experiencing forces that would crush ordinary electronics. By December 1942, the team had created a working prototype. The Mark 32 fuse contained 5 vacuum tubes, a battery activated by firing setback, an oscillator generating radio waves at 180 MHz, and a thyrotron switch triggering detonation when the return signal strength indicated a target was within a lethal radius. The entire device measured 3 inches long and weighed 11 ounces. The first combat test had occurred with USS Helena on January 5, 1943. But widespread Pacific deployment awaited resolution of security concerns. The Navy feared the technology might be captured and copied if used over land. By October 1944, as kamikaze attacks began, the United States had manufactured over 1 million proximity fuses at $18 each, expensive compared to conventional fuses, but insignificant compared to the ships they would protect. Production facilities in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Bridgeport were manufacturing 40,000 fuses daily, primarily using female workers who didn't know what they were assembling. The fuses arrived at Pacific Fleet bases in crates marked "Special Ammunition. Handle with care." Security remained so tight that most gunnery officers received only basic operating instructions without understanding the technology. The shells appeared identical to conventional rounds, except for a small plastic nose cone protecting the radio antenna. Captain Willis Lee, commanding Battleship Division 7, received the first major shipment of 5-inch proximity-fused shells in November 1944. His gunnery officer, Commander Edwin Hooper, recalled, "They told us these shells would triple our effectiveness against aircraft. We thought it was propaganda until we saw them work." The proximity fuse operated on elegant physics principles. As the shell approached an aircraft, transmitted radio waves would reflect back with increasing strength. When the return signal indicated the target was within a lethal radius, typically 70 feet for a 5-inch shell, the fuse triggered detonation. The explosion created a sphere of steel fragments expanding at supersonic speed, each fragment capable of penetrating aircraft aluminum at 200 yards. The truly revolutionary aspect was its discrimination capability. Rain, clouds, and chaff didn't provide a sufficient radar return for triggering. Ground return was filtered out by the Doppler shift, the same phenomenon that changes a train whistle's pitch as it passes. Only the rapid closure rate with an aircraft created the precise conditions for detonation. The invasion of Okinawa, beginning April 1, 1945, became the proximity fuse's supreme test against mass kamikaze attacks. The Japanese launched the Kikusui, floating chrysanthemums operations, 10 massive waves totaling approximately 1,900 kamikaze sorties over 3 months. For the first time, the majority of American ships carried proximity-fused ammunition for all calibers from 5-inch down to 40 millimeters. The first Kikusui attack on April 6, 1945, coincided with Operation Tengo, the battleship Yamato's suicide sortie. Kikusui-I involved 355 kamikaze aircraft and 344 conventional fighters. At 15 hours, radar screens aboard USS El Dorado showed what operators called a snowstorm. So many aircraft that individual returns merged into a solid mass. Fire Controlman Second Class. Eugene Hardy aboard destroyer USS Newcomb described the action. They came in waves, one after another. Our 5-inch opened up at 12,000 yards. We could see black puffs out there and planes falling. Not diving, but falling broken. The proximity fuses were turning near misses into kills. USS Lafay's April 16th ordeal provided the most dramatic demonstration. At Radar Picket Station Number 1, the destroyer faced 22 kamikaze aircraft in 80 minutes. Her crew fired 637 rounds of proximity-fused 5-inch ammunition. Despite being struck by 6 kamikazes and 4 bombs, Lafay survived, her guns destroying at least 9 attackers. The proximity fuses created what survivors called a wall of steel around the ship. Commander Frederick Beckton, Lafay's captain, reported, "The proximity fuses saved us. We'd see a kamikaze boring in, our guns would fire, and the plane would disappear, not shot down, but disintegrated. The fuses turned our defensive fire from probability into certainty." Statistics from Okinawa revealed the transformation. Ships equipped with proximity fuses destroyed kamikaze aircraft at rates 7 times higher than those using conventional ammunition. The difference translated directly into lives and ships saved. Japanese pilots quickly recognized something fundamental had changed in American anti-aircraft capabilities, though they never understood what. Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Minobe, who flew escort for kamikaze missions, testified after the war. Beginning in late 1944, American anti-aircraft fire became supernatural. Planes would explode without being hit. Our pilots reported that Americans had deployed invisible wires or aerial mines. Captured Japanese documents revealed growing confusion. A tactical bulletin from the 2001st Air Group dated December 1944 stated, "Enemy anti-aircraft effectiveness has increased dramatically. Shells appear to detonate by proximity rather than contact. Recommend irregular flight paths and extreme diving angles." The Japanese developed various theories. Magnetic fuses attracted to engines, infrared sensors detecting heat, even psychics who could detonate shells mentally. They wrapped engines in asbestos, installed degaussing coils, and experimented with wooden aircraft, all futile against radar-based fuses. Ensign Toshio Yoshitake, captured after his aircraft was damaged by proximity fuse fragments, told interrogators, "We were told American gunners were poorly trained and relied on volume. But their shells seemed to know where we were. They would explode all around us, creating walls of metal. Flying through American fire became like flying through a steel storm." The proximity fuse represented a remarkable achievement in miniaturization and mass production. Each Mark 53 fuse, the most common variant by 1945, contained 134 electronic components assembled with microscopic precision. The complete device had to function after experiencing 20,000 times gravity during firing, spin at 30,000 RPM in flight, and operate in temperatures from 40° Celsius to 140° Celsius. Manufacturing required revolutionary techniques. Workers used jeweler's loops to solder connections smaller than rice grains. Quality control tested one of every 500 fuses by actually firing it. Rejection rates initially exceeded 60%, but improved to under 8% by 1945. The battery alone represented a breakthrough in engineering. A glass ampule of electrolyte that shattered upon firing, activating a wet cell that provided power for 20 seconds of flight time. This meant fuses could be stored indefinitely, without battery degradation. Western Electric developed special winding techniques for vacuum tubes, supporting elements with microscopic springs that allowed flexing under acceleration without breaking. These modifications enabled hearing aid tubes to survive forces that would crush standard vacuum tubes. Proximity fuses didn't just improve existing tactics, they revolutionized naval anti-aircraft doctrine. Before their introduction, ships relied on barrage fire, creating walls of shells hoping aircraft would fly through them. This required enormous ammunition expenditure with poor success probability. Commander Joseph Callahan, tactical officer for Task Force 58, explained, "With time-fused shells, we tried hitting a specific point in space at a specific moment, nearly impossible against maneuvering targets. With proximity fuses, we only needed to get shells reasonably close. The fuse handled the rest." Ships developed new firing patterns optimized for proximity fuses. Instead of concentrated barrages, they could engage multiple targets simultaneously with smaller salvos. A destroyer that previously needed 50 rounds for a reasonable hit probability could now engage 3 aircraft with the same ammunition. The fuses enabled effective night defense for the first time. Previously, darkness made range estimation nearly impossible for setting time fuses. Proximity fuses eliminated this problem. Shells determined their own detonation point, regardless of visibility. Lieutenant Commander Roger Bond, gunnery officer on USS Enterprise, reported, "Night kamikaze attacks had been our nightmare. We'd fire thousands of rounds blindly. With proximity fuses, our night effectiveness jumped from maybe 10% to over 70%. The Japanese virtually abandoned night attacks by mid-1945. By war's end, American factories had produced 22,134,581 proximity fuses, one for every 6 people in Japan. The program employed workers at 87 firms operating 110 facilities, with security rivaling the Manhattan Project. The Crosley Corporation plant in Cincinnati became the largest producer, manufacturing 16,500 units daily at peak production. The factory operated with extraordinary security. Workers entered through guarded gates, surrendered personal items, and worked in windowless rooms, assembling components identified only by code numbers. Quality control exceeded anything previously attempted in mass production. Every 1,000th fuse was test-fired at Aberdeen Proving Ground. If it failed to detonate within a specified range, the entire batch was rejected. This stringent testing achieved combat reliability exceeding 95%. The program consumed strategic materials voraciously. Each fuse required small amounts of silver, gold, and platinum for electrical contact. By 1945, the proximity fuse program used more silver monthly than the entire pre-war American jewelry industry used annually. Both sides recognized the proximity fuse's importance, triggering intense intelligence battles. The Germans had captured examples used against V-1 flying bombs over England and desperately tried to develop countermeasures. The Japanese, lacking captured examples, tried to piece together the technology from combat observations and shell fragments. American intelligence implemented extraordinary protection measures. Proximity fuses could only be used over water until late 1944. When USS Drexler sank at Okinawa with magazines full of proximity-fused ammunition, the Navy considered the dangerous operation of demolishing the wreck to prevent recovery. Commander Joseph Rochefort, Pacific Fleet Intelligence Head, coordinated elaborate deception campaigns. False intelligence was leaked, suggesting improved effectiveness came from better training and optical sights. Captured German agents were fed disinformation about magnetic anomaly fuses that detected Earth's magnetic field distortion. The Japanese never acquired an intact proximity fuse during the war. Their best information came from interrogating captured B-29 crew members who had limited knowledge. This led Japanese scientists on futile pursuits developing radio-guided shells. The U.S. Navy's Operational Research Group conducted detailed effectiveness analysis throughout 1945. Their findings, classified until 1958, revealed the proximity fuse's true impact. During pre-proximity fuse operations, October 1944 to January 1945, kamikaze aircraft achieved a 28.7% hit rate, counting both direct strikes and damaging near misses. Ships averaged 312 rounds fired per aircraft destroyed. Destroyer picket ships suffered 1 sunk or severely damaged per 15 kamikaze sorties. After widespread proximity fuse deployment, February to August 1945, kamikaze hit rates dropped to below 10%. Ships averaged 89 rounds per aircraft destroyed, a 71% ammunition efficiency improvement. Destroyer losses dropped to 1 per 47 kamikaze sorties, despite the Japanese adoption of more aggressive tactics. Analysis revealed tactical nuances. Proximity fuses proved most effective against high-angle diving attacks, the kamikaze's preferred approach, with success rates exceeding 85% against aircraft diving steeper than 45 rounds. Against low-level approaches, effectiveness dropped, but remained superior to conventional ammunition. Captain Willis Lee's April 1945 action report provided specific examples. During the 16th April action, this force engaged 43 attacking aircraft. Proximity-fused 5-inch ammunition accounted for 31 confirmed kills at ranges between 4,000 and 9,000 yards. Conventional ammunition fired in parallel achieved 3 kills, despite expending 40% more shells. Not every ship immediately mastered proximity fuse employment. The technology required new training, tactics, and maintenance procedures. USS Newcomb's experience illustrated the learning process. Initially, the destroyer's crew set radar-controlled guns for a maximum rate of continuous fire. This created electromagnetic interference between multiple proximity fuses, actually reducing effectiveness. 5 kamikazes penetrated their defense on April 6, 1945, causing severe damage. Lieutenant Commander Irving McPhersonson, Newcomb's gunnery officer, reported, "We were firing so many proximity fuses simultaneously, they interfered with each other. Radio waves from multiple shells created false returns. We learned to coordinate fire using controlled bursts rather than continuous streams." The Navy rapidly developed new doctrines. Ships designated specific mounts for proximity fuse firing, while others used conventional ammunition. Fire control teams developed pulse patterns, rhythmic firing sequences, minimizing interference while maximizing coverage. Maintenance proved equally crucial. The delicate electronics required protection from humidity, salt spray, and temperature extremes. Ships in tropical waters discovered fuses stored in uncooled magazines often failed. Solutions included installing dehumidifiers and temperature controls in ammunition spaces. The scale of the proximity fuse program was truly staggering and almost defied comprehension. From January 1943 to August 1945, a total of 22,134,481 fuses were produced across 110 facilities in 26 states. At its peak, daily production reached an astounding 75,000 fuses of all types, including 40,000 anti-aircraft fuses alone. This immense effort came at a significant cost of $1.2 billion in 1940s dollars. The program's material consumption was voracious, requiring 12 tons of silver and $800 of gold every month, as well as 15,000 meters of wire and a total of 140 million vacuum tubes throughout the war. Despite the complexity and scale, the program maintained remarkable quality. With a 95.3% combat reliability rate, a minimal 0.3% premature detonation rate, a 4.4% dode rate, and an impressive 99.7% storage stability after 1 year. Japanese records captured after surrender revealed the psychological impact of proximity fuses on kamikaze units. The 721st Naval Air Group's War Diary, recovered from Kanoya Air Base, contained increasingly desperate entries through 1945, January 1945. Enemy anti-aircraft fire shows marked improvement. Shells detonate by proximity rather than timer. Recommend minimum altitude approach until final run. March 1945. Losses before reaching attack position exceed 60%. Enemy shells create impenetrable barriers around high-value targets. Morale declining as pilots realize death may come without achieving impact. May 1945. Pilots report flying into solid walls of steel. Conventional evasive maneuvers are ineffective. Request permission for night attacks exclusively. July 1945. Daily sake ration increased. Many volunteers expressed preference for conventional missions despite lower honor. Enemy fire appears guided by supernatural forces. Lieutenant Koshi Ogawa, One of the few kamikaze pilots who survived multiple missions due to mechanical failures testified after the war, "We expected to die gloriously for the Emperor. Instead, we watched our comrades explode far from their targets, their sacrifice meaningless." It was not battle, but execution. The Mark 53 proximity fuse, standard by 1945, represented extraordinary engineering. Physical specifications: length 3.2 inches, diameter 2.1 inches, weight 11.3 ounces. It contained 134 individual parts, electronic systems, oscillator frequency 180 to 220 megahertz, power output 0.4 watts, detection range 15 to 70 feet adjustable, battery life 20 to 30 seconds post-activation. Signal processing involved 4-stage amplification. Performance parameters: activation setback 20,000 gauss, spin, tolerance 30,000, RPM, temperature range 65 °C, 500 grad humidity, resistance 98% at 150 degrees Fahrenheit, shock, survival 500 lateral. The fuse's operation was elegantly simple despite its internal complexity. A firing setback shattered the electrolyte ampule, activating the battery. Centrifugal force from the shell's spin armed the detonator after 0.8 seconds. The oscillator transmitted while the receiver listened for returns. When the reflected signal amplitude indicated a target was within lethal radius, a thermotron switch discharged the firing capacitor. The entire sequence from detection to detonation required only 0.0003 seconds. Admiral Richmond Turner, commanding amphibious forces at Okinawa, credited proximity fuses with making the invasion possible. "Without proximity fuses, I estimate our losses would have exceeded 150 ships sunk. The invasion might have failed. This technology saved tens of thousands of American lives." The proximity fuse's effectiveness influenced Japanese strategic decisions. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement mentioned a new and most cruel bomb, referring to atomic weapons. But Japanese military records showed equal concern about conventional defense improvements. An Imperial Navy staff study from July 1945 concluded, "Enemy anti-aircraft capabilities have progressed, where special attack operations no longer achieve favorable exchange." Ratios. Post-war strategic bombing survey. Interviews revealed the proximity fuse's strategic impact. Admiral Suemu Toyoda, chief of the Naval General Staff, stated, "We calculated 500 special attack aircraft could destroy 100 American ships at Okinawa. Due to their new anti-aircraft weapons, 500 aircraft achieved less than 30 ships seriously damaged." This failure made continuation mathematically impossible. The economics of the proximity fuse program proved remarkably favorable, demonstrating a massive return on investment. With a total program cost of $1.2 billion, the technology is estimated to have saved over 200 major vessels and countless smaller ships, with a replacement cost of saved ships alone amounting to $8 billion. Beyond the financial savings, the fuses are credited with saving an estimated 40,000 to 60,000 lives and avoiding $2 billion in medical and disability costs. The operational efficiency gains were also substantial, with a 70% reduction in ammunition expenditure, a 60% decrease in magazine space requirements, and a 50% reduction in gun crew fatigue. Furthermore, the engagement time per target was reduced by 65%. The exchange ratio was overwhelmingly in the Allies' favor. The combined cost of a single proximity fuse, 18 tors, and a 5-inch shell, 12 dwarf, was only $30, while the average kamikaze aircraft cost $15,000, creating a highly favorable 500-to-1 ratio. By July 1945, proximity fuses had become so effective that Japanese tactics underwent a radical revision. Operation Ketsugo, the plan for defending the home islands, abandoned mass daylight kamikaze attacks entirely, emphasizing night attacks, ultra-low approaches, and exploitation of poor weather. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki, commanding Special Attack Forces, wrote in his diary on July 24, 1945, "The Americans have developed a defense we cannot penetrate. Our young men die in vain, exploding in empty sky far from targets. We must find new methods or abandon special attacks." The Japanese developed Operation Seigi, a plan for suicide attacks using stripped fighters flying at wavetop height to avoid radar detection. Aircraft would approach below 50 feet, climbing only seconds before impact. This showed promise in limited trials, but Japan surrendered before implementation. Japanese scientists worked frantically on electronic countermeasures. Project Yashima attempted developing jamming transmitters for proximity fuse frequencies. Laboratory tests showed promise, but Japan lacked the industrial capacity for meaningful production. Their best prototype weighed 200 pounds and required its own aircraft, defeating the purpose. The proximity fuse's success triggered rapid technology transfer across Allied forces. British forces used ground-based anti-aircraft guns with proximity fuses to destroy 79% of V-1 flying bombs targeting London after December 1944. Soviet forces were provided 25,000. Proximity fuses under Lend-Lease and reported similar success over Eastern Front. Cities. The technology spawned immediate innovations. By war's end, American scientists had developed proximity fuses for aerial rockets, naval rockets, artillery shells, mortar rounds, and aerial bombs. Each application required unique modifications. Rocket fuses for higher velocities, artillery fuses with ground return filters, and bomb fuses with barometric switches preventing high-altitude detonation. Unknown to Americans, Germany had independently developed proximity fuses, illustrating the difference between invention and production. The German Kranich fuse used capacitive sensing, detecting electrical field disturbance caused by aircraft proximity. The German design was arguably more elegant, requiring only 23 components versus the American fuse's 134, but it proved impossible to mass-produce with German methods. Total German production reached only 8,000 units before war's end, compared to America's 22 million. Dr. Hubert Chardin, the lead German proximity fuse scientist, wrote post-war, "We solved the theoretical problem in 1940 before the Americans began. But theory without production capacity is merely interesting. The Americans built in one day what took us a month." Statistical analysis reveals the proximity fuse's role in preventing catastrophic casualties during the planned invasion of Japan. Operation Downfall, scheduled for November 1945, anticipated 5,000 to 10,000 kamikaze aircraft attacking the invasion fleet. Pre-proximity fuse loss rates suggested 400 to 500 ships sunk or severely damaged, with 100,000 naval casualties. With proximity fuses, planners reduced estimates to 100 to 150 ships lost and 25,000 casualties. Still horrific, but manageable. The atomic bomb's use eliminated the need to test these projections, but the Okinawa experience suggested even reduced estimates were pessimistic. Individual ship experiences illustrated lives saved. USS Aaron Ward, attacked by multiple kamikazes on May 3, 1945, shot down 6 with proximity-fused ammunition despite suffering damage from 3 hits. Statistical analysis suggested that without proximity fuses, most attacking aircraft would have struck home, likely sinking the ship with heavy casualties. Gunner's mate Aristides Futrides, who commanded Mount 52 during USS Lafay's ordeal, later calculated, "Computer analysis in the 1970s showed that with conventional ammunition, we would have been hit by 14 kamikazes instead of 6. No ship survives 14 kamikaze hits. Every man aboard owed his life to proximity fuses." Fire controlman Lawrence Dowski added, "The proximity fuse gave us hope. Before, when radar showed 50 bogies incoming, we knew most would get through." After VT fuses, we had confidence. The technology was on our side. The proximity fuse program advanced multiple technological fields by decades. Miniaturization requirements pioneered techniques later used in transistor development. Mass production methods pre-staged modern electronics manufacturing. Quality control standards established benchmarks still used in aerospace. Dr. James Van Allen reflected in 1980, "The proximity fuse program was the Manhattan Project of electronics. We compressed 20 years of development into 24 months. Every cell phone, every computer, every piece of modern electronics owes something to the manufacturing techniques we pioneered." The program produced 87 patents, established 12 new manufacturing processes, and trained thousands in precision electronics assembly. Post-war, these workers formed America's electronics industry core. Companies like Texas Instruments, Fairchild Semiconductor, and Intel traced their origins to proximity fuse manufacturers. Japan's post-war evaluation appeared in the 1952 War History series published by the Japanese Defense Agency. The analysis concluded proximity fuses had fundamentally altered the mathematics of special attack operations, rendering them strategically ineffective by March 1945. Captain Rikihei Inoguchi, a senior kamikaze operations staff officer, wrote in 1958, The proximity fuse was not merely a technical improvement, but a paradigm shift. It transformed anti-aircraft fire from probability-based to deterministic. Our pilots faced not random death, but systematic destruction. Admiral Takejiro Onishi, the kamikaze program's father, committed suicide on August 16, 1945. His note read partially, "I apologize to the souls of my brave subordinates," and their bereaved families for sending them to. Deaths that achieved nothing. Historians believe proximity fuse effectiveness contributed to his despair. Throughout 1945, proximity fuses underwent continuous improvement based on combat experience. The Mark 58, introduced in May 1945, incorporated Okinawa lessons with improved discrimination circuits reducing cloud triggering by 90%, variable sensitivity settings for different target sizes, enhanced countermeasures defeating Japanese jamming attempts, extended battery life reaching 35 seconds, and miniaturized components reducing weight to 9.8 ounces. The Mark 59, ready when Japan surrendered, would have incorporated micro-alloy vacuum tubes, increasing reliability to 99.2% while reducing the cost to $11 per unit. The proximity fuse program demonstrated American industrial adaptability. Factories that had never produced electronics transformed overnight into precision manufacturers. Zenith Radio Corporation's Chicago plant converted from home radios to proximity fuses in 6 weeks. The program required unprecedented cooperation between competitors. RCA, Westinghouse, General Electric, and Sylvania shared patents and manufacturing techniques freely. Trade secrets closely guarded in peacetime were published in weekly bulletins distributed to all manufacturers. The definitive numbers from the Pacific War underscore the profound impact of the proximity fuse. Of the 22,734,481 fuses produced, 5.3 million were fired in combat, leading to a 7-fold increase in effectiveness over conventional fuses and a 70% reduction in ammunition expenditure. This translated directly into lives and ships saved, with estimates ranging from 40,000 to 60,000 American lives, over 200 major warships, and more than 500 smaller vessels. The toll on the Japanese was equally stark, with over 2,800 aircraft and 4,200 pilots lost, and kamikaze effectiveness plummeting from a dangerous 28.7% to below 10%. Economically, the program's $1.2 billion investment yielded a stunning $10 billion in prevented losses, an impressive 8.3 to 1 return on investment. Admiral Mark Mitcher, Task Force 58 commander, submitted his final action report on August 20th, 1945. The proximity fuse was the decisive technology in defeating Japanese special attack tactics. Without it, our losses would have been unsustainable. With it, kamikaze attacks became an exercise in enemy attrition. In the war's final month, Japanese kamikaze units achieved only a 2.8% success rate. 97 of every 100 pilots died without reaching their targets. The proximity fuse had transformed the kamikaze from an unstoppable force into a predictably defeated tactic. Captain Joseph Enright, commanding USS Archerfish, provided an eloquent summary. The proximity fuse didn't just shoot down planes. It shot down an entire military philosophy. The Japanese believed spiritual superiority could overcome material disadvantage. The proximity fuse proved that technology properly applied defeats fanaticism. The proximity fuse established principles still governing military technology. Miniaturization multiplies power. Fitting radar into shells proved size reduction multiplies military effectiveness. Every modern smart weapon traces its lineage to proximity fuses. Production wins wars. Germany's superior design meant nothing without production capacity. America's ability to manufacture millions of complex devices proved decisive. Integration over innovation. The proximity fuse contained no revolutionary components, just existing technologies brilliantly integrated. Modern doctrine emphasizes system integration over breakthrough innovation. Automation saves lives. Removing human decision-making from split-second combat dramatically improved effectiveness. Today's automated defense systems follow proximity fuse principles. The radar proximity fuse stands as World War II II's most decisive yet underappreciated technology. While the atomic bomb ended the war dramatically, proximity fuses had already made the invasion of Japan feasible by neutralizing the kamikaze threat. Without them, American casualties might have reached levels making continued war politically impossible. The numbers tell only part of the story. Behind every statistic were young Americans who lived because shells exploded at precisely the right moment, and young Japanese who died without achieving their sacrifice's purpose. The proximity fuse transformed the Pacific War's final act from mutual slaughter into technological dominance so complete that further resistance became meaningless. The proximity fuse was more than a weapon. It was American industrial and scientific supremacy made manifest. It declared that no amount of courage, no willingness to die, no spiritual devotion could overcome the material advantages of a fully mobilized democracy. The kamikaze pilots offered their lives. The proximity fuse made that offer irrelevant. Sailors who watched kamikazes disintegrate in mid-air. Workers who assembled components without knowing their purpose. And scientists who solved impossible problems. All were part of democracy's answer to totalitarian fanaticism. That answer, delivered through 22 million proximity fuses, was simple. American technology would protect American lives. Regardless of the price, enemies were willing to pay. The proximity fuse had done more than destroy aircraft. It destroyed the fundamental premise of kamikaze warfare, that spiritual determination could overcome material disadvantage. Against American radar, miniaturized and mass-produced, the divine wind dissipated into a historical footnote. The rising sunset on Japanese military ambitions, brought down by radio waves and vacuum tubes smaller than a coffee cup. The final irony was complete. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor to prevent American interference in their expansion. They ended the war watching their most dedicated warriors explode harmlessly in empty sky, destroyed by American technology so advanced it seemed supernatural. The proximity fuse transformed their ultimate sacrifice into ultimate futility. The radar proximity fuse was democracy's perfect weapon against fanaticism, not matching sacrifice for sacrifice, but making sacrifice irrelevant through superior technology. It won through production rather than destruction, innovation rather than immolation, and protecting life rather than glorifying death. In that victory lay not just the Pacific War's end, but the template for American military supremacy continuing today. The kamikaze came to die. The proximity fuse ensured they died achieving nothing. In that reality lay Imperial Japan's defeat and American democracy's triumph, measured not in courage, but in electronics, not in spirit, but in science, not in death, but in the technology that prevented it.